Hi, and welcome to a video about something that is probably a little bit controversial right now in the DBD community. Dead art. No, not the old dead art, the new dead art, which apparently is an issue for a lot of people. I want to give my point of view, not just as someone that plays both sides, but also as someone who doesn't use dead art anymore, despite being pretty good at hitting it all the time, and my friends could testify about it because I basically only play Survivor in a Swift, which is the most OP way of playing Survivor. So one might question, like, why giving up Dead Art when it's such a strong perk, especially when you can coordinate with everyone else? Well, that's a very good question, and I'm very glad to answer. So, as Survivor, what I found is that even if you can hit all your dead arts perfectly, the server validation is gonna be weird and inconsistent. And I don't know about you, but I really like getting value from my perks if the situation allows. So, hitting E and just, landing face down on the floor instead of doing a backflip, that didn't seem like much value for me. That wouldn't happen all the time, and yes, Dead Art saved my ass so many times. But still, I prefer to, know that if I use the perk, I use the perk. It's not gonna get lost somewhere, some way. Of course, the second problem would be that the killer can wait it out. And this of itself, wouldn't be much of a problem actually. But I have found out that in order to pay attention to what the killer was going to do, and I don't mean like frantically looking behind, but just simply trying to get hints from the red stain, maybe just looking forward, pretending I don't have it, I will loop terribly. This is a skill issue, 100%. You can see so many survivor mains on YouTube that could loop for ages and can time their dart perfectly against killers that wait for 25 seconds. That's not me. That's not the average survivor, probably. That, if you're watching this, that's probably not you. So, yeah, the killer waiting out my dead art wasn't much an issue of itself, but it was more of an issue about the fact that I would look like shit when I was injured, and maybe I had the chance to pay a little more attention to the pathing I was taking. I wouldn't, because I just wanted to time my dead art perfectly, knowing that if I don't, the server is gonna eat it. So yeah, I didn't like that. And in the end, like, if the killer you're playing against is smart and they're not newbies against whom you're probably, just gonna escape anyway, I would most of the time save my dead art for endgame, showing them that I didn't have it. But at the point wasn't, just hope or adrenaline a better perk. So I ended up actually switching my dead art for something else, other exhaustion perks in the beginning. Right now, I don't currently, use many exhaustion perks anymore. I have my reasons, but I decided to switch from dead art to mostly balance landing because it's probably the only perk that actually allows you to work on otherwise problematic generators, for me at least, like the one in the main building in Cold Tower, which you can only grade if you have balance landing. Otherwise, no matter what exhaustion perk you have, it's gonna be a hit for the killer. And if you're already injured, eh. So yeah, I switched to balance landing for a while, and I am currently not using any exhaustion perks because I just wanna pay more attention to my pathing and learn to look better before relying on something. But this is just me. These are the reasons that made me swap dead art for something else. And basically, like, the reason number one is I just want a perk that is consistent. I want a perk that if I vault a window makes me go faster. If I crouch and press, E is gonna create a diversion 20 meters away from me. I want something that does what it says it does without validation and lagging killers and whatever. I want perks to do what perks do. The first rant that I hear, which actually makes sense, like it's the only one that makes sense for me, is if the survivor that darts at the pallet, well, there's no counterplay. I agree. But I would also point out that if the survivor jumps off the main building with balanced landing, there's no counterplay there too, unless you're very, very close. So with the dart at the pallet, you get a free pallet and a free hit most of the time. If the survivor is very good, you only get a hit, sure, and they're gonna loop somewhere else, or they're gonna, they're gonna recycle the same loop again and then drop the pallet. But I don't know enough how many like comp squads you run every day, but most of the survivors I run into, like, yeah, sometimes they happen to be at the pallet when they did art when I catch up, but most of the time it's like not a whole team just leading me to pallets to dead art. I don't know, but I'm not gonna discuss anyone's MMR because that's gonna be a cesspool I'm not gonna touch with a stick. Um, for any other placement in the map, literally you can bait it against less experienced survivors by just quickly swinging up and down with your camera. You can wait it out in pretty much any situation. Just don't launch when you are on the survivor's back. You just wait for 1 second, 2 seconds. If they're on a window, even better, because at the point, even if they vault, you can grab, you can hit again. Like they don't have like any kind of counterplay to your waiting out in those situations. Like literally the only situation is pallets. And the third is they're gonna force your panic swing by FOV tacking or running into you. I've done this countless times. It works a lot. But once you see that the survivor is not paying attention to the circumstances, to their surroundings, is just taking very weird padding, is just bubbling left and right, unless they're super mega babies, they're probably trying to bait a dead art out, like a hit out of you to dead art. So just don't give it to them. Wait a second, wait 2 seconds, wait 3 seconds, and then swing. Yes, they could still time it, but to at the point, they deserve it. It's counterable most of the time, I would say, which wasn't true for all dead art. I didn't have to endure that for very long, luckily, but for the very short time I had to, uh, it was very, very cringe. So yeah, I'm very glad it just gives you endurance for half a second now. That seems way more balanced to me. Is it annoying? Yes, but a lot of stuff is annoying, and it's still in the game. I've also seen the argument that it's worse against certain killers. I agree. Killers that have a very split second to take a hit, that cannot, afford to wait for the dead art, yeah, there are pretty much disadvantages. So, Huntress, Hag, Nurse, but honestly, I cannot be particularly sad if a nurse hits a dead art. It also is completely useless against other killers, Legion, Slinger, most of the time. And there are other perks, other exhaustion perks especially, that are actually very, very problematic against these killers. Like the cringe I feel every time I see someone sprinting burst my frenzy away. Is it an overall healthy perk for the game? As any other exhaustion perk, I will say. It even gives you, as the killer, some more agency about what to do, because you can wait it out. While you can't wait other exhaustion perks out, balance landing, sprint burst, whatever. See, here I'm eating a dead art. Why? Because I was a baby spirit and dead art had not been out for very long at this point. So, yeah, if I waited there, she would be down. That was a misplay for me. All dead art would have been like a huge, amazing fucking problem at this point, because she would have made whatever loop without needing any skill, without even baiting anything out. It was way more skillless. So back to dead art. It definitely has a bigger impact on killers that have a very short windows in which they can land their hit, like Nurse, like Hag, um, like Spirit if you play her in a certain way, if you're very confident about your ability. But I don't think anyone would argue that having a little bit more counterplay against this killer is gonna be a bad thing. It's not. I vaulted the window, by the way. It's probably gonna be hard on killers that are more inexperienced, that don't know how to wait it out, but you learn eventually. It's really not that hard to wait it out, and the better you get at zoning survivors, the harder it's gonna be for them to actually bait the swing at a pallet. What I think though is that behavior really doesn't like meta, whatever meta is at the point. behavior really, really dislikes some perk, like any perk, being used by the majority of the players, and has very, very clearly stated, see me waiting that out for 5 minutes here, has very, very clearly stated that they're gonna tweak every perk that get used very much, even if the perk is actually kind of balanced in itself. They did it with Ruin, they did it with uh, well, Iron Will was actually a well called nerf in my opinion, but this may be biased as a spirit main. They did it with so many perks in 6.1 that were actually pretty normal and not OP just because everyone was using them. They replaced Ruin with Eruption Cold Brine, which is way more obnoxious in my opinion. But anyway, they show that they don't want the perk to be used by the majority of the players. So yeah, I think it's possible that actually the dart is gonna get a tweak, just as Eruption is probably gonna get a tweak because of that. Will I be crying? No. As I said, I don't really use the perk anymore. But if you do, or if you don't, I would really like to know why you have chosen to keep it or to drop it. Have you never used it? Is it in some of your builds but not others? Do you find it useful against certain killers but not against certain others? How's your experience with Dead Art? And if you've been played for a very long time, I'm particularly interested in how you compare the new Endurance Dead Art with the old Dead Art. I didn't have the misfortune to play against Storm Dead Art for very long, so I kind of consider myself lucky. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a good day or night or whatever time of the day it is there. Bye.